They said the alien girl tore through anyone who entered her cell. Then a human walked in, offering half a ration bar. By morning, she wouldn't let them take her human away. Where are you watching from? Subscribe to join humanity's next impossible story. Dante Cole had stopped counting days 3 months ago. Time on outpost. Lysithea moved differently when you were the guy everyone pretended not to see. Former military medic. Former hero. If you believed the old mission reports. Now? Just another auxiliary security grunt with a faded N7 jacket and too many regrets. The coffee in the mess hall tasted like recycled disappointment, which was fitting. He stirred it mechanically, watching the brown liquid swirl without really seeing it. In 6 hours, his shift would start. Another night of walking the containment sector, making sure the Coalition's collection of aggressive species stayed locked up tight. Another night of not thinking about the civilians he'd saved on Kepler 442b, the ones who got him court-martialed for disobeying direct orders. The alarm screamed before he finished his cup. Level 3 containment breach, not a drill. The automated voice was eerily calm as chaos erupted around him. Scientists ran past, their multi-species faces twisted in identical panic. Something had gone wrong in the lower research bay. Something bad enough that even the Vrin, those 6-limbed know-it-alls who never showed fear, were abandoning their posts. Dante moved on instinct, heading toward the breach instead of away. Old habits. He found Dr. Vale Kaur in the observation corridor, her crystalline fingers dancing across a holographic display with surgical precision. The Heliac scientist barely glanced at him. In the months he'd worked here, she'd never once looked at him like he was anything more than a maintenance fixture. You, Cole. Her voice had that particular quality of someone addressing a tool. We have a situation. Through the reinforced glass, Dante could see the containment cells. Most were empty now, their occupants evacuated or already loose, but one remained sealed. Cell 47, the red biohazard symbol blinked steadily above it. The Kareth specimen in 47, Doctor. Kaur continued, her attention still on her screens. Classified as violently unstable, attempted contact with 3 handlers, all required medical intervention. Dante felt something cold settle in his stomach. And you're telling me this because? Because you're going in there. She finally looked at him and her eyes held the kind of calculation that made him wish he'd finished that terrible coffee. The breach compromised our holding protocols. We can't risk it escaping during the evacuation. You will remain inside until we regain control of the facility. He understood immediately. Not a safety measure, a sacrifice. Put the expendable human in with the killer alien. Let nature take its course. Problem solved either way. You realize she'll probably kill me, Dante said flatly. Unlikely to be instantaneous. You were a combat medic. Survive as long as possible. Dr. Kaur pressed a button, and the cell door hissed open. That's an order. 2 guards shoved him forward before he could protest. The door sealed behind him with a sound like a coffin closing. And there, in the far corner of the cell, something moved. She was bigger than he expected, nearly 7 feet of coiled muscle covered in short, dark gray fur that caught the dim light like smoke. The Kareth, Sharen, according to the label on her cell. She faced the corner, her spine rigid, breathing in sharp, rapid bursts that made her shoulder blades shift beneath that strange, almost human silhouette. Dante's pulse hammered in his ears. Every self-preservation instinct screamed at him to press against the door, to make himself small, to pray. But that old, stupid part of him that had gotten him dishonorably discharged took over instead. He looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't crouched to attack. She was curled up, defensive, and she was shaking. His training kicked in before his fear could stop him. The stance, the breathing pattern, the way her fur stood on end around that ugly scar on her neck. He'd seen enough trauma patients to recognize the signs. Hey, his voice came out steadier than he felt. If you're gonna kill me, make it quick. but if you're just hungry, I can split what I've got." He pulled out his ration pack, the one he'd grabbed from the mess hall, broke it in half with hands that only trembled slightly, extended one piece toward her, arm outstretched, palm up, non-threatening. Sharon turned her head. Golden eyes, slitted like a cat's but somehow deeply human, fixed on him. A low growl built in her chest, vibrating through the small cell. Her lips pulled back, revealing fangs that could tear through Kevlar. But she didn't move forward. Minutes stretched like hours. Dante didn't lower his hand, didn't speak. Just waited, the way you'd wait for a feral dog to decide you weren't a threat. His arms started to burn. Still, he held it out. Then, with movements so slow they seemed painful, Sharon uncoiled. She stayed low, her body language screaming caution, and crept forward, 3 feet away, 2, 1. Her nostrils flared, taking in his scent. She snatched the food from his hand with speed that made him flinch, but not with claws, with fingers, long and elegant despite the deadly points at their ends. She retreated to her corner and devoured the ration in seconds, watching him the entire time. Dante let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Okay, good. That's good." He slid down against the wall, keeping his movements slow and visible. His own portion of the ration tasted like cardboard, but he ate it anyway. Needed the calories, needed something to do with his hands. All the while, those golden eyes tracked him. An hour passed, then 2. The alarm outside had gone quiet, but no one came to let him out. Dr. Kor's voice crackled through the intercom once, asking for his status. He gave it. She acknowledged. That was all. In the 3rd hour, Dante noticed Sharon was shaking again. Not from fear this time. Her breathing had become labored, and even in the cell's poor lighting, he could see the unnatural shine of fever sweat on her skin where the fur was thinnest. He'd seen that look before. Infection. The scar on her neck was recent, the tissue around it inflamed and angry. How long had they left her like this? How long had they mistaken septic shock for aggression? "They called you Rabid," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. "But you're just sick, aren't you?" Sharon's head lifted at his voice. She made a sound, something between a growl and a whimper. Her eyes found his again, and this time he saw something in them that made his chest tighten. She was asking for help. The smart thing would be to stay put, to wait for rescue, to not get close to the creature that had put 3 people in medical. But Dante Cole had never been smart about helping people who couldn't help themselves. That's why he was here in the first place. He moved slowly, telegraphing every motion, pulled the basic med kit from his belt, the one all security carried. It wasn't much. Antiseptic wipes, a few bandages, one precious tube of broad-spectrum antibiotics meant for human use. "I'm going to come closer," he said, his voice low and even. "I'm going to look at that wound. You can rip my throat out if you want, but I'd appreciate it if you didn't." He expected her to bolt, to attack, to do anything but what she did. Sharon tilted her head to the side, exposing the wounded neck. Submitting. Dante's hands shook as he cleaned the infection. The wound was deep, poorly treated and clearly painful. Every time she flinched, he murmured something, anything. Reassurances that probably meant nothing to her but helped him focus. The antibiotic wasn't designed for Kareth biology, but infection was infection. He applied it generously, wrapped the wound with careful precision. When he finished, Sharon pressed her forehead against his shoulder. Not aggressive, not violent, just contact, the gesture of someone who'd been alone too long in a cage. "Safe smell," her translator chirped suddenly, startling them both. The words were broken, barely functional, but clear enough. "You... safe smell." Something in Dante's chest cracked open. "Yeah," he whispered. "You, too." They stayed like that as the station's artificial night cycle dimmed the lights. Exhaustion pulled at him, the adrenaline crash inevitable. He shouldn't sleep, couldn't sleep, but his body had other ideas. When he woke, Dawn was filtering through the cell's narrow window, and Sharon was curled against him, her breathing steady and unlabored. The fever had broken. She'd survived the night. So had he. The sound of boots in the corridor made them both snap alert. Dr. Kaur appeared beyond the glass, flanked by armed guards. Her expression was unreadable as she studied the scene. "Fascinating," she said. "Open the cell. Remove the human for decontamination." The guards moved forward, weapons raised. Dante started to stand to comply, but Sharon moved faster. She placed herself between him and the door, her body language transforming in an instant. No longer the sick, frightened creature from last night. Now she was every inch the apex predator her species was designed to be. Her claws extended with an audible snick. Her growl made the guards hesitate. And then she spoke, clear and unmistakable, in words that every camera in the facility recorded. "Don't take my human." The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then all hell broke loose. The medical bay smelled like antiseptic and fear. Dante sat on the examination table while 3 different specialists scanned him for contamination, infection, psychological breaks, and whatever else the coalition thought a night with a Kareth might cause. None of them made eye contact. They spoke about him in third person, as if he weren't there. Subject shows no signs of physical trauma. Psychological evaluation pending. Recommend isolation protocols, minimum 72 hours. Through the observation window, he could see Dr. Kaur in deep discussion with a Heliac admiral whose chest held enough metals to stop shrapnel. Whatever they were saying, it involved a lot of pointing at data screens and occasional glances in his direction. None of it looked good. "Am I under arrest?" Dante asked the room. The youngest specialist, of Rin with nervous antenna twitches, almost answered before his superior silenced him with a look. No response. That told him everything. They moved him to an isolation cell that was technically better than his old quarters, but felt infinitely smaller. White walls, a cot, a camera in the ceiling that didn't even pretend to be hidden. The door sealed with a click that echoed. He lay down and closed his eyes, trying to find the exhaustion that should have pulled him under. Instead, his mind replayed the morning. Sharon's body between him and the guards. The way her voice had cracked when she'd said "my human." The look on Dr. Kaur's face, cold calculation warming into something worse. Scientific interest. Sleep came eventually, but it brought dreams that weren't his own. He stood in a cage made of light. Everything smelled wrong, tasted wrong. Hands grabbed him, speaking words that cut like glass, pain in his neck, something hot and cruel being cut into his flesh. He tried to scream, but his voice came out as a roar that no one understood. No one wanted to understand. To them, he was specimen, monster, thing. Then a different smell, coffee and kindness, hands that touched without hurting. A voice that spoke to him, not at him. Safety. Finally, after so long, safety. Dante woke with a gasp, his heart pounding. The isolation cell came back into focus slowly, but the fear lingered. Not his fear. Hers. "What the hell?" he muttered, pressing his palms against his eyes. It happened again the next time he slept. And the next. Flashes of Sharon's memories, her emotions bleeding into his consciousness like watercolors running together. The torture disguised as research. The handlers who saw her as a biological weapon to be programmed, not a person. The crushing loneliness of being the only thing of her kind on a station full of beings who feared her. And beneath it all, a new feeling. Confusion mixed with something tender and fierce. The human who shared food, who cleaned wounds, who smelled like protection. On the third day Dr. Kaur finally visited. She brought data pads and that expression Dante had learned to hate. The one that said she was about to explain something unpleasant with clinical detachment. "The Kareth specimen has formed what we call an imprint bond," she began without preamble. "It's a neurological phenomenon we've observed in exactly 0 cases until now. Kareth are solitary hunters. They don't bond. They don't form attachments. They certainly don't develop psychic connections with other species. Dante sat up slowly. Psychic? The dreams you've been experiencing aren't dreams. They're memories, emotions, thoughts. Dr. Kaur pulled up a holographic scan of 2 brains, one human, one distinctly alien. Threads of light connected them. Your neural patterns have synchronized. It shouldn't be possible. The biology is entirely incompatible. And yet, she swiped through more data, her movements sharp. The specimen refuses to eat, becomes violent when separated from you, shows signs of distress that mirror your own physiological responses. You're chemically bonded on a level we don't fully understand. Her name is Sharon, Dante said quietly. Dr. Kaur looked at him for the first time since entering. It's a specimen designation, not a person. She spoke. She claimed me. She knows her name. He stood, anger finally breaking through the numbness. And you've been torturing her. We've been studying an aggressive species with military applications. No guilt in her voice, just facts. The fact that you've anthropomorphized your captor is textbook capture bonding. Stockholm Syndrome. I wasn't captured. You locked me in there. A distinction without difference. She closed the holograms with a gesture. Regardless, the situation has become complicated. The Admiral wants to study this bond phenomenon, understand how it formed, replicate it, if possible. Imagine soldiers bonded to Kareth warriors, an unbeatable force. Dante felt ice in his veins. You want to weaponize this? We want to understand it. You'll both be moved to a joint observation facility. More comfortable than isolation. We'll run tests, gather data. If you cooperate, this could reduce your sentence significantly. She moved toward the door, then paused. The alternative is termination of the specimen, for safety reasons. She left him with that choice that wasn't really a choice at all. They moved him at night. The joint facility was larger, designed to hold 2 beings, 2 cots, a shared space, a window that showed the swirling storms of Romir in the distance, and cameras. So many cameras. Sharon was already there. She stood when he entered, her golden eyes wide. The wound on her neck was healing, properly treated now. They'd cleaned her fur, removed the worst of the neglect, but she looked smaller somehow, diminished by fear. The door sealed, the guards left, and then she moved, closing the distance between them in 3 long strides. She didn't grab him, didn't tackle him. Just stood there, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her body, and breathed in his scent like she was memorizing it. Safe smell, she said, and her voice cracked. Thought they took safe smell away. I'm here. Dante lifted a hand slowly, giving her time to pull back. When she didn't, he touched her shoulder gently. I'm here. She made a sound he'd never heard before, something between a purr and a sob. Her forehead pressed against his chest, and he felt the tremors running through her. All that predatory strength, undone by simple kindness. They told me you wouldn't come back, she whispered. The translator made her voice small. Said humans abandon, said I was wrong to choose. They lied. He didn't think, just wrapped his arms around her. She was all hard muscle and soft fur, radiating heat. I came back. I'll keep coming back. Something passed between them then, more felt than seen. A settling, like 2 puzzle pieces finally clicking together after being forced apart. The ache in his chest eased, the phantom pain in her neck dulled. Their heartbeats found the same rhythm. This is so wrong, Dante muttered, but he didn't let go. Feels right, Sharon countered. She pulled back enough to look at him, those golden eyes searching his face. Explain why wrong. Because, he struggled for words. Because you're Kareth and I'm human. Because they're watching us. Because this kind of connection doesn't make sense. Does it have to make sense to be real? That stopped him. When had she gotten so articulate, or had she always been and no one had bothered to listen? The days that followed developed a strange routine. Tests in the morning, blood draws, neural scans, behavioral observations. The scientists treated them like fascinating anomalies, which Dante supposed they were. But in the evenings, after the observers left, they had a few hours of something almost like peace. Sharon learned quickly. She'd been pretending to understand less than she did, a survival mechanism in a place that punished intelligence. Now she spoke in full sentences, asked questions, told him stories about her homeworld in fragments. "We're not monsters," she said one night, staring at Romir through the window. "My people. We hunt, yes, we fight, but we also sing, create, love." She turned to him. "They took me young, raised me in labs, tested how much pain I could endure, how fast I could kill, never asked what I wanted. What do you want?" She was quiet for a long moment. "To not hurt anymore, to smell safe things, to choose my own path." Her clawed finger traced the pattern on his old N7 jacket. "To understand why you make the empty parts feel full." Dante had no answer for that. He was feeling the same thing. The bond between them growing stronger with each passing day. He dreamed her dreams. She felt his emotions. When she was stressed, his pulse quickened. When he laughed at some absurd observation she made, her whole body relaxed. It was the most intimate thing he'd ever experienced, and it terrified him. On the 7th day, Dr. Core delivered the news with her usual clinical detachment. "The Admiral has made his decision. The bond is too unpredictable to weaponize. Too dangerous to allow to continue." She looked at him through the observation glass. "The Kareth specimen will be terminated in 48 hours. Humanely. You'll be reassigned after a memory wipe to remove traumatic bonding elements." She said it like she was discussing waste disposal scheduling. Dante felt Sharon's fear spike through their connection before she even moved. She grabbed his arm, claws carefully retracted, eyes wild. "What did she say?" "Dante, what does terminate mean?" He met her gaze and saw understanding dawn, saw the hope that had been growing in her eyes gutter like a candle in the wind. "No," she whispered. "No, they can't. We fix what we break, you said. You said we fix things." The phrase he'd taught her, a stupid motto from a show he'd watched as a kid. She'd latched onto it like a lifeline, repeating it whenever the tests got too painful. "I know," he managed. "I know I did." That night, while she cried silently against his shoulder, Dante made a decision. He'd been a good soldier once, followed orders, trusted the system. That's what had gotten civilians killed on Kepler 442b. That's what had gotten him dishonorably discharged. He'd learned his lesson. Sometimes the right thing to do was disobey orders. Sometimes saving one person mattered more than following protocols. Sometimes you had to break the rules to fix what was broken. He held Sharon closer and started planning. They had 48 hours to do the impossible. 36 hours left. Dante sat on his cot, pretending to sleep while his mind raced through possibilities. Sharon was actually sleeping, curled on her own cot across the room. Even in rest, she kept one hand extended toward him, fingers barely touching the edge of his blanket. The bond between them hummed like a live wire, carrying her dreams into his consciousness. She was dreaming about sky. Open, endless sky with 3 moons. Home. A place she'd barely known before they took her. The cameras watched everything. Dr. Core had mentioned during one of the tests that they'd captured over 300 hours of footage, studying their interactions, documenting how the bond manifested. Every touch, every word, every moment of connection that defied their biology. All data for a report that would be filed away after Sharon was terminated. Dante opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling. He'd been in tight situations before, pinned down in hostile territory, medical supplies running low while casualties mounted. The mission on Kepler 442b, where he'd had to choose between following evacuation orders and saving the civilians trapped in the collapsed shelter. He'd chosen the civilians, saved 43 lives, lost his career, and he'd do it again. This was the same choice, just a different cage. The next morning, they took Sharon for testing alone. Standard procedure, they said. Dante felt her anxiety spike through the bond as she was led away, felt the clinical coldness of the examination rooms, the pain of new samples being taken, the fear she was trying so hard to hide. He used the time to memorize everything: guard rotations, door mechanisms, the location of the security station, the layout he'd learned during his months as auxiliary security, now repurposed for escape planning. When Sharon returned, there was a new bandage on her arm and that hollow look in her eyes, the one that said she was starting to give up. "They asked me questions," she said quietly, settling onto her cot. "About feelings, about the bond, about you." She pulled her knees up, making herself smaller. "Asked if I would hurt you. If ordered." "What did you say?" "I said I would die first." She met his gaze. "They wrote that down." Seemed pleased. Of course they were. More data. More proof that the bond created exploitable loyalty. Dante felt something hot and bitter rise in his throat. They were studying love like it was a disease, trying to understand how to weaponize the most fundamental need to protect someone you cared about. "How much do you remember about the station layout?" he asked carefully. Sharon's ears perked forward. "Why?" "Just curious." She watched him for a long moment, and he felt her reading his emotional state through the bond, the determination, the planning, the dangerous hope. "You're going to do something stupid," she said, not a question. "Probably." "Good." She uncurled, and something fierce flickered in her golden eyes. "I'm very good at stupid." They planned in fragments, never discussing it directly, knowing the cameras were watching. But through the bond, through careful words and meaningful looks, they built a strategy. Sharon remembered the research sector's layout from her various trips to testing. Dante knew the security protocols, the shift changes, the weak points in the station's design. 24 hours left. Dr. Kaur visited one final time. "Tomorrow morning you'll be separated and sedated. The procedure will be quick, for both of you." She paused. "I want you to know, Cole, that this isn't personal. The bond phenomenon is simply too dangerous to allow to continue. You understand?" "Sure," Dante said. "I understand perfectly." After she left, Sharon moved to sit beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "She believes we'll accept this. Go quietly. She doesn't know humans very well." "Or Kareth." Sharon's claws extended slightly, then retracted. "We don't go quietly." That night, Dante couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the timer counting down, saw the peaceful way Dr. Kaur had discussed murder, saw the future where he woke up with holes in his memory, not remembering the woman currently pressed against his side like she could merge their bodies through proximity alone. "I'm scared," Sharon whispered into the darkness. "Me too." "But you're going to try anyway." "Yeah." She was quiet for a moment. "On my world, we have a saying. Roughly translates to, better to fall from the sky while flying than never leave the ground. I like that. Dante?" Her voice was small. "If this doesn't work, if they catch us, I want you to know that these days with you have been the first time I felt like a person and not a weapon. Thank you for that." He pulled her closer, felt her heart beating against his ribs through the bond. "We're going to make it. Both of us. You can't promise that. Watch me." The next morning came too fast. Guards arrived early before the usual testing time, 4 of them heavily armed. They weren't taking chances. "Cole, come with us," the lead guard said. "Separation protocols begin now." This was it. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Dante stood slowly, making eye contact with Sharon. Through the bond, he pushed everything he felt. "Trust me. Be ready. I'm not leaving you." She nodded, almost imperceptibly. The guards escorted him down familiar corridors. But instead of turning toward medical, Dante stumbled, catching himself against the wall. One hand brushed the maintenance panel he'd noted weeks ago, the one with the faulty lock. "Keep moving," the guard snapped. "Sorry, didn't sleep well." Dante complied, but his fingers had already done their work. The panel was unlocked. One small step. They placed him in a prep room, alone, told him to change into the medical gown on the table. Sedation would begin in 20 minutes. He changed, keeping his old clothes, especially the N7 jacket. Then he waited, counting seconds. The station's ventilation system ran on a predictable cycle. Every 40 minutes, there was a brief pressure equalization that caused minor fluctuations in the electronic locks. Dante had noticed it during his security rounds. Most people didn't even register it. He registered everything. When the pressure shift hit, the door's magnetic seal weakened for exactly 3 seconds. Dante had fashioned a makeshift pry bar from a bed frame support during the night. He jammed it into the seal gap and pulled. The door opened. Alarms would trigger in seconds. He had to move. The maintenance panel was 2 corridors over. He ran, medical gown flapping, heart pounding so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. 1 corridor. 2. There. He ripped the panel open and grabbed the emergency override keycard he'd stashed there during last week's security rounds. Every auxiliary security member had access to one. Most never used them. Dante had planned for this moment since the first time Dr. Kaur had looked at Sharon like she was a specimen instead of a person. The alarms started screaming. Lockdown protocols engaged. He had minutes, maybe less. He sprinted toward the research sector, toward Sharon. The override card opened doors that should have been sealed. Guards were scrambling, confused by the lockdown. One tried to stop him. Dante didn't fight, just dodged and kept running. The bond pulled him forward like a compass. He felt Sharon's confusion, her fear. Then, as understanding dawned, her fierce determination. Cell 47. Back where it started. He swiped the override card, and the door hissed open. Sharon stood in the center of the cell, already in motion. She'd broken free of her restraints, the ones they'd put on for the termination prep. Blood streaked her wrists where she'd forced the clamps apart. "Told you I'd come back," Dante gasped. "Humans are very bad at following rules," she said, and despite everything, there was a smile in her voice. "I like this about you. We need to move, now." He threw her a maintenance worker's coverall he'd grabbed from a locker. "Put this on. We're heading for the auxiliary dock." They ran together, her natural speed throttled to match his human pace. The station was in chaos. Guards running toward the breach alerts. Scientists evacuating. No one expected the escape attempt to be heading deeper into the facility, but Dante had learned something during his months here. Sometimes the last place anyone looks is the most obvious. The maintenance corridors were narrow, dark, and mostly unmonitored. They made it 3 levels down before running into resistance. 2 guards, positioned at a checkpoint. No way around. Sharon moved before Dante could think. She was on them in seconds, all predatory grace and controlled violence. No killing blows, just efficient strikes that left them unconscious. She was protecting them, even now. "Good restraint," Dante said, checking the guard's pulses. "You taught me." She looked at her claws. "They wanted me to be a weapon. You showed me I could be more." They kept moving. Level 7, 8. The auxiliary dock was on level 9, used primarily for supply transfers. If they could reach a shuttle, they had a chance. The corridor opened into a wider space. Dante's heart sank. The dock was sealed, blast doors engaged, and standing between them and freedom was Dr. Kaur, flanked by a full security team. "Predictable," she said calmly. "The auxiliary dock was the logical choice. We've been waiting." Dante felt Sharon tense beside him, ready to fight. But there were too many. Even with her strength, they couldn't win. He looked at the energy panel on the wall, the one that controlled the corridor lighting and environmental systems. It was old tech, the kind that could overload if stressed. "Do you trust me?" he whispered to Sharon. "With everything I am." "Then when I say run, you run," straight at that panel behind them, the one marked R2. He saw understanding flash in her eyes, saw her measure the distance. "That's a very stupid plan." "You said you were good at stupid." Dante stepped forward, drawing Dr. Core's attention. "You really think this is going to end well for you? Terminating a sentient being? Erasing my memory? The Coalition Council will love that report." "The Council authorized this research," Dr. Core said. "You're the one who'll be condemned, helping a dangerous specimen escape. They'll lock you in a cell for the rest of your life. Better than living without a conscience." He moved then, charging straight at the security line. They raised their weapons, ready to stun. Sha-Rin moved simultaneously, but in a different direction. While they focused on Dante, she reached the panel. Her claws ripped through the housing. Sparks erupted. She jammed her hand directly into the power coupling, completing the circuit through her body. The pain that shot through the bond made Dante scream. But it worked. The energy feedback cascaded through the system. Lights exploded, the blast doors trembled. And in the chaos of darkness and alarm, Dante grabbed Sha-Rin's hand and ran. The maintenance tunnels were never meant for running. Pipes hissed overhead, spilling steam that turned the air thick and hot. Dante's lungs burned. His legs screamed. Behind them, boots pounded against metal grating. Orders shouted in 3 different languages. They weren't giving up. Sha-Rin's hand gripped his, pulling him forward. Her other arm hung limp from the electrical burn, but she didn't slow down. Couldn't slow down. Through the bond, he felt her determination overriding pain. Felt her absolute refusal to let them take him again. "Left here," Dante gasped, recognizing a junction. 2 more levels. They burst through a door into a cargo transfer bay. Stacks of supply containers created a maze. The auxiliary dock entrance glowed at the far end, blessed and tantalizingly close. Dante's override card would work. It had to work. They were halfway across when the first shot rang out. The stun blast missed Sha-Rin by inches, scorching the container beside her head. She snarled, spinning to face the security team flooding into the bay. 6 guards, maybe more behind them. "Go," she growled, pushing Dante toward the dock. "I'll hold them." "Not a chance." He pulled her behind a container as another volley of shots peppered their cover. "We do this together or not at all." "Dante, you can't fight them." "Watch me." Mo. He grabbed a cargo loader remote from a nearby station and activated it. The heavy machinery lurched to life, mechanical arms swinging wildly. Not enough to stop trained guards, but enough to create chaos. Enough to give them seconds. They ran again, weaving through containers. The dock entrance was right there. Dante swiped the card. The door started opening. Hope surged through his chest, bright and painful. Then something slammed into his back. The impact drove him forward. He hit the ground hard, tasted blood. His body went numb from the stun blast, muscles seizing. Through the haze of pain, he felt Sha-Rin's terror spike through the bond, felt her rage ignite like a star going nova. She was on the guards before they could fire again. All pretense of restraint gone. This was the Kareth warrior they'd tried to create, except she wasn't fighting for them. She was fighting to protect. Claws tore through armor. Strength bred for war turned against its creators. Dante tried to move. His body wouldn't respond. Paralysis from the stun would wear off, but it would take minutes they didn't have. He could only watch as Sha-Rin fought like something feral and magnificent and utterly desperate. She cleared a path, grabbed him under the arms and dragged him through the dock entrance. The door sealed behind them, and for one perfect moment, they'd made it. The auxiliary dock stretched before them. 3 shuttles sat ready. Freedom. Then Dante's body decided to make things complicated. The stun blast had hit him wrong. He tried to stand, manage 3 steps, and his legs gave out. Blood on his hands, blood on the floor. Something was wrong internally. The blast had done more than paralyze. "Dante!" Sha-Rin's voice cracked. "Dante, get up!" Trying. He coughed, tasted copper. "Give me a second." She lifted him like he weighed nothing, running toward the nearest shuttle. Her hands shook as she activated the hatch. Inside. Medical pod. If she could get him in the medical pod, the automated systems would stabilize him. The dock door exploded inward. 12 guards this time. Dr. Core behind them, her crystalline face impassive. Surrender the human, and you'll be terminated quickly. Continue resisting and we'll make you watch him die slowly. Sharon lowered Dante into the shuttle's medical pod. Her hands were gentle despite the claws, despite the blood covering both of them. She looked at him, and through the bond, he felt everything. The love that had grown between them, the grief of knowing what came next, the acceptance. "What are you doing?" He tried to sit up. His body wouldn't cooperate. "You said we fix what we break." She smiled, showing all her teeth. Sad, determined, beautiful. "I'm fixing this." She entered commands into the pod's console, sealed him inside. Dante's hands pressed against the transparent cover, panic flooding through him. "Sharon, no. Don't do this. We can both make it." "Liar." She touched the glass where his hand was. "You're dying. Takes 30 minutes to reach jump point. You have maybe 10 before critical organ failure. Math doesn't work for both of us." "I don't care about the math." "I do." She began the shuttle's launch sequence. "Because I love you, and love means making sure you live." The words hit harder than any stun blast. Through the bond, he felt the truth of them, felt how deeply she meant it. This creature they'd called a monster, incapable of emotion, loved him with an intensity that burned. "I can't lose you," he choked out. "You won't." She placed her hand flat against the glass. "The bond doesn't die. I'll always be here." She tapped her chest. "And you'll always be here." Outside, the guards were advancing, setting up positions. They'd destroy the shuttle before letting it launch. Sharon saw it too. She looked at the controls, at him, and made her choice. "Going to tell you a secret," she said, her voice soft. "On my world, when we choose a mate, we mark them, share our genetic signature, makes them family, makes them ours." She touched her chest where a faint luminescent pattern was starting to glow beneath her fur. "I marked you 3 days ago. While you slept, you're Kareth now. Part of you anyway." "What does that mean?" "Means you'll heal faster, live longer, carry me with you." She grinned, fierce and proud. "Means I made sure you'd be okay without me." She kissed her fingers, pressed them to the glass where his hand was. Then she stepped back and activated the shuttle's emergency launch. The pod's medical systems kicked in, flooding Dante with sedatives and healing accelerants. "No!" He fought the drugs, watching as she moved to the docking bay's manual controls. "Sharon, please." "Love you, stubborn human." She yanked the lever. The bay doors began opening to space. Wind screamed as atmosphere vented. "Tell them I went down fighting. Tell them the monster learned to love." The last thing Dante saw before the sedatives pulled him under was Sharon standing in the dock entrance, facing down the guards. Her body glowed with that strange luminescence, her claws extended fully. And she roared. It wasn't a sound of rage. It was a promise, a declaration, a final fuck you to everyone who'd tried to break her. The shuttle launched, automated systems taking over. Through the viewing port, Dante watched the station recede, watched the dock where Sharon held her ground. She'd bought him 30 seconds, a minute, enough time to clear the station's weapons range. The last image burned into his mind was her silhouette against the station lights, small and defiant. Then the shuttle jumped to FTL and she was gone. The bond screamed. Dante felt impact after impact as stun blasts hit her, felt her knees hitting the deck, felt her thoughts clear and calm despite the pain. Worth it. He's safe. That's all that matters. Then, gradually, the bond began to fade. Not breaking, just stretching. Distance and sedation numbing the connection. Her presence in his mind became an echo, a whisper. "Safe smell," she murmured across the void. "Always safe smell." When Dante woke, 3 weeks had passed. The patrol ship that found his shuttle had taken him to a coalition medical facility. Human doctors examined him, expressed amazement at his recovery rate, couldn't explain the glowing pattern that had appeared on his chest, a genetic marker from a species he shouldn't be able to share DNA with. Dr. Kaur visited once, informed him that the Kareth specimen had been neutralized during the escape attempt, deceased, body disposed of according to protocol. She expressed regret at the waste of research potential. Dante said nothing, just stared at her until she left. The official report called him a victim of bonding manipulation, cleared him of charges due to psychological compromise. They were giving him a medical discharge and transport back to Earth. The generous thing to do for a man who'd been through so much trauma. They had no idea what they'd lost, what they'd destroyed. All they saw was data, protocols, successful termination of an escaped specimen. Dante touched the glowing mark on his chest and felt it pulse. Felt something moving through it that wasn't quite thought, wasn't quite sensation. A presence, distant but undeniably there. She'd said the bond doesn't die. He'd thought she meant metaphorically. As he sat in his hospital bed, feeling that pulse beneath his skin, he started to wonder. The coalition had declared her dead, but they'd also said Kareth couldn't form bonds. That connection was biologically impossible. That love was a human weakness. They'd been wrong about all of it. Somewhere in the dark between stars, in the places where patrols didn't venture and pirates learned to fear shadows, there were rumors. Whispers of a gray phantom that struck without warning, that protected human vessels, that left no bodies but countless survivors who swore they'd seen golden eyes in the dark. The coalition said these were tall tales, space psychosis, nothing more. Dante packed his few belongings and prepared for the transport to Earth. He knew better than to ask questions, better than to show hope. But late at night, when he closed his eyes and focused on the mark over his heart, he could swear he felt her. Out there, alive, waiting, his stubborn, beautiful monster who'd learned to love. And if the rest of his life was spent searching the frontier, well, he'd always been bad at following orders. Earth smelled like rain and growing things. Dante had forgotten that. 3 years on sterile stations had scrubbed the memory of soil and chlorophyll from his lungs. Now, standing in the overgrown yard of the small shelter he'd purchased outside Seattle, he breathed it in like medicine. The animal shelter had been a month's wages and most of his settlement money. It wasn't much. 12 kennels, a small clinic. Room for expansion if he ever got the funding. Most people thought he was crazy, retiring to run a shelter for abandoned animals. Ex-military medics usually went into private practice or trauma consulting, but Dante wasn't most people anymore. The glowing mark on his chest pulsed as he carried bags of feed from his truck. It did that sometimes, random moments when warmth would spread through him, accompanied by feelings that weren't quite his own. Contentment when he helped an injured stray, amusement when he botched cooking dinner, fierce protectiveness when anyone got too aggressive around the animals. Sharon's presence, distant but undeniable. The bond hadn't broken. It had just changed frequency, operating on a wavelength that defied coalition science and common sense. He'd stopped trying to explain it. The therapist they'd assigned him after the discharge had diagnosed complicated grief and trauma bonding, prescribed medication for the delusions. Dante had smiled, nodded, and never taken a single pill. He knew what was real. The first dog arrived on a Tuesday. Someone had dumped her on a rural road, too old and sick to be profitable anymore. Dante spent 3 hours stabilizing her, coaxing her through fear and pain. When she finally relaxed, pressing her head against his hand in trust, he felt that familiar pulse from the mark. Safe smell, his mind whispered, in a voice that wasn't quite his own. More animals came. Word spread about the weird ex-military guy who'd take anything, treat anything. The shelter filled with the unwanted, the broken, the aggressive cases other places wouldn't touch. A 3-legged cat that hissed at everyone. A parrot with self-mutilation issues. A wolf-dog hybrid deemed too dangerous to adopt out. Dante worked with each one. Patient, consistent. Meeting aggression with calm, fear with gentleness. He understood what they'd been through, what it felt like to be labeled dangerous when you were just scared, to be seen as a monster when you were simply trying to survive. The wolf dog, a massive gray creature named Storm, became his shadow. Something about her reminded him of Sharon, the golden eyes, the way she moved, how she'd been called vicious right up until someone treated her with basic kindness. Nights were the hardest. That's when the dreams came. Not the connected dreams from before. These were different. Fragments, images that felt like memories but couldn't be his, running across ship hulls in zero gravity, the taste of fear from pirates who'd chosen the wrong convoy to raid. The satisfaction of sending humans home, safely, and always, underneath, the ache of missing him. Dante would wake with tears on his face and that mark burning warm against his skin. He'd press his hand to it, sending his own thoughts into the void, hoping she could feel them the way he felt her. I'm okay, still here, still yours. 6 months into running the shelter, a coalition patrol officer visited, not Dr. Core, thank God. This one was younger, a human woman who looked uncomfortable in her uniform. Dante Cole? She checked her datapad. I'm Officer Martinez, just following up on some unusual reports from the frontier. I'm retired, Dante said carefully, not inviting her past the threshold. I know, but your name keeps appearing in statements. Cargo haulers on the Rome-Mir route reporting a entity that protects human ships from pirates. Gray, approximately 7 feet, moves like a kareth, but shows unusual restraint. She looked up from her pad. 3 captains swear this entity responded when they called for help. One said it saved his entire crew from a hull breach, stayed until rescue arrived. Dante's heart hammered. Kareth are aggressive. Everyone knows that. Normally, yes, but this one only attacks non-humans threatening humans. Never kills. Just incapacitates and leaves. Martinez studied his face. You worked on Outpost Lysithea, in the containment sector. You were there when the Kareth specimen escaped and was killed. I was there when your people murdered someone who'd never hurt anyone except in self-defense, Dante corrected, voice flat. Anything else, officer? She was quiet for a moment. The captains who've encountered this entity all say the same thing. It smells them first, like it's checking for something. Then it either helps or leaves. She leaned forward slightly. One captain swears it paused by his pilot, just stood there, breathing in his scent. The pilot's jacket had blood on it from a recent medical emergency. Human blood. She paused. Your blood type specifically, according to records. The mark on Dante's chest burned. His hand moved to cover it automatically. That's quite a theory, officer. It's not a theory if it's true. She glanced at his chest where his hand rested. I read the report on your escape, about the bond, the genetic marking. Dr. Core concluded it was a contamination that would fade. She smiled slightly. Dr. Core is brilliant, but she's never been wrong about anything, which means she doesn't know how to recognize when she is. Why are you telling me this? Because the official stance is that the Kareth specimen died at Outpost Lysithea, but I'm a pattern recognition specialist, and the patterns don't lie. She handed him a data chip. Frontier patrol routes, updated weekly. Public record, so it's not classified. She stood to leave. If someone wanted to, I don't know, take humanitarian supplies to frontier stations, these would be the safest routes. Least pirate activity. Dante took the chip, understanding flooding through him. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just... She paused at the door. The universe is a lot bigger than the Coalition admits, and a lot stranger. If there's someone out there protecting our people, well, I figure they deserve to know someone's grateful. After she left, Dante held the data chip and felt the mark pulse strongly. Through it came a wave of emotion so powerful it drove him to his knees. Recognition, longing, hope. She knew he was looking for him too. The bond stretched across light years, but it held. That night, Dante began planning. The shelter could run without him for a few months. His assistant was capable. He'd saved enough for a ship passage to the frontier. Nothing fancy, just transport to the edge where civilization frayed and the real work began. Storm laid her head on his lap as he worked, her golden eyes watching, understanding in a way that transcended species. She'd been abandoned too. She knew what it meant to wait for someone to come back. "I'm going to find her," Dante told the wolf dog. "Even if it takes the rest of my life. I'm going to find her and bring her home." The mark flared bright, visible even through his shirt. And for just a moment, he swore he heard her voice across the impossible distance. "Coming," it whispered, always coming back to safe smell. 3 months later, Dante stood on the deck of a supply freighter heading to the frontier. He'd signed on as ship's medic, using his old credentials. The captain didn't ask many questions. Most frontier haulers didn't. They were 2 weeks into the journey when the pirates hit. 4 ships, military-grade weapons, demanding cargo and crew for ransom. The captain prepared to surrender. Cheaper than fighting. Then the proximity alarms screamed. Something had attached to the hull, moving with purpose. The pirates' communication turned frantic, then silent. Through the viewport, Dante saw her, a gray shape moving across the pirate vessel's hull, tearing through their external weapons with methodical precision. Disabling, not destroying. Efficient. Controlled. She launched herself from their ship to the next, a leap that shouldn't have been possible. The mark on his chest burned like a star. He pressed his hand against the cold viewport, and she stopped, turned her head. Even across the distance, he knew she felt him. The wolf knows the wolf. He remembered her teaching him. Bond calls to bond. She finished with the pirates in minutes. They'd live, but their ships were gutted. Then she was moving toward his vessel, toward him. The crew panicked, reaching for weapons, but the captain held them back. Something in Dante's expression must have told him this wasn't an attack. She maglocked to the observation deck's external door, her face pressed against the reinforced glass. Golden eyes found his. The fur around them was matted. New scars crossed her body. She looked feral, dangerous, every inch the monster they'd called her, and she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Dante's hand matched hers against the glass. The bond snapped fully open for the first time since that day in the hangar. Everything she'd felt, every moment of loneliness, every human ship protected because they might carry him, every pirate beaten back because they threatened his kind, every night spent searching, waiting, hoping. Worth it, she thought every single time. He's alive, safe. That's everything. The captain approached slowly. "Friend of yours?" "Something like that." Dante couldn't look away from her. "Permission to open external door, sir?" "You know that's insane." "I do." The captain studied them both, the way they mirrored each other, the obvious connection. He sighed. "Coalition's going to have my license for this. Screw it. Open the door." The deck decompressed slowly, equalizing pressure. Dante pulled on an emergency vac suit, hands shaking. When the door finally opened, she didn't rush in. Just stood there staring at him like she couldn't believe he was real. "Took you long enough to come looking," she said, and her voice cracked. "Had to arrange transportation. Turns out finding a gray legend in the black isn't easy." He took a step forward, then another. "I knew you were alive. They told you I was dead. They lied about everything else. Why believe that?" He was close enough to touch now, close enough to see the tears gathering in her golden eyes. "You said the bond doesn't die. You were right." She collapsed into him, this powerful, deadly creature reduced to trembling relief. He held her, vac suit awkward between them but not enough to matter. The bond sang complete. "I protected them," she whispered. "The humans, your people. Protected them because they were yours. I know. I heard." He pulled back enough to see her face. "You saved hundreds of lives, Sharon. You became exactly what you said. More than a weapon. A guardian. A hero." Just wanted to make you proud. I was always proud, from the moment you chose kindness over fear." He touched her scarred neck, where his bandage had been all those months ago. "Now we choose together. No more cages, no more running, just us." The captain cleared his throat diplomatically. "Not to interrupt, but we need to finish this run. Your friend is welcome aboard if she promises not to eat anyone." Sharen bared her teeth in what might have been a smile. "Only if they deserve it." "Humph. Fair enough." The captain walked away, muttering about retirement and hazard pay. They stayed on the observation deck as the ship jumped to FTL, watching stars streak past. Two beings who shouldn't have connected, who'd been told their bond was impossible, their love illogical, their care for each other a weakness to be terminated. The coalition had been wrong, about everything, because the thing they feared most wasn't that humans could bond with other species. It was that love, in all its messy, illogical, beautiful stubbornness, was the most powerful force in the universe. It couldn't be weaponized, couldn't be controlled, couldn't be killed. It could only be chosen, again and again, across impossible distances and through unimaginable pain. "What happens now?" Sharen asked, her head resting on his shoulder. "Now, we fix what we break." Dante smiled. "We go home. You meet Storm, help me run the shelter. Save more lives that everyone else gave up on. A simple life. The best kind." She was quiet for a moment. "The coalition will look for me." "Let them look. They won't find what they're expecting." He turned to face her fully. "Because you're not their monster anymore. You never were. You're family." The mark on his chest pulsed, and matching luminescence glowed beneath her fur. Two hearts beating in sync, two lives bound by something deeper than genetics or logic or fear. They'd locked him with the rabid alien girl, expecting death. Instead, they'd created something the galaxy had never seen. Not a weapon, not an experiment. Just two broken people who'd chosen to heal together. And in that choice, they'd proven the oldest human truth. That love isn't a weakness. It's a rebellion, a revolution, a stubborn, illogical, beautiful refusal to give up on someone who deserves better. Somewhere in coalition space, Dr. Core would file her reports. Would note the failed containment. Would recommend stricter protocols. She'd never understand what she'd lost, what she'd tried to destroy. Dante pressed his forehead to Sharen's, the way she'd done in that cell so long ago. Safe smell. Always safe smell. The ship jumped again, carrying them toward Earth, toward home, toward a life they'd build together, one rescued animal at a time, one act of kindness, one stubborn choice to care when the universe said not to. In the end, that was the most human thing of all, the thing that made them dangerous and beautiful and impossible to break. They loved, and love always found a way home. In the end, maybe humanity's real superpower was never technology, strength, or speed. It was the stubborn ability to care for someone the universe told us not to. Dante didn't just fix a wound, he fixed the very definition of us. Because when a man and a so-called monster choose compassion over fear, the line between species doesn't blur, it disappears. And maybe that's the quiet rebellion that keeps the cosmos interesting, not conquering galaxies, but choosing to hold someone's hand in the dark and say, "You're safe here, Eve." But tell me, what would you risk to protect something everyone else called dangerous? Have you ever met someone who made you feel seen instead of studied? And when was the last time you chose kindness even when it didn't make sense? If you made it all the way here, you're officially part of our Interstellar Misfits Club. Type "safe smell" in the comments so I'll know you stayed till the end. Tell me your city or your planet, because I want to see how far this little rebellion of empathy travels. Subscribe if you believe that compassion is still humanity's most advanced technology. Hit like. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that monsters are often just misunderstood. And don't miss the next video in the card at the end of this transmission. Somewhere out there, Sharon and Dante are still flying home. And, honestly, so are we.